Well, Dan, are you ready to get started?
Yep, ready when you are.
All right. I'm going to be recording this, Dan, so be able to replay this. Would like to do that at a later time.
Okay.
Let me just say a few opening remarks, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect.
Hello, everybody. This is Len Santalucia. I'm the CTO Business Development for Vicom Infinity, IBM Premier Business Partner that and runs these sessions about once a month to bring things that I find around during my travels. And this was one session where I saw Jest from IBM Technical Specialist presenting at the Marist Enterprise Computing Conference. He did such a great job, and people were asking a lot of questions afterwards. He had a line in front of him at the podium afterwards. And I said, you know, this is going to be a good session for one of our Lunch and Learns. So here we are today. Keep everybody on mute through the session so that there's any background noise, we don't have any interference. And we'll have time, I think we'll have some at the end, Dan, for some, right?
Gotta finish up with some time for questions for sure.
All right, so Dan, why don't I just turn it over to you, let you introduce yourself on your background and anything you might like to say, opening remarks, and you can drive us all through this session. So here's yours.
Thanks, Len. Thank you for the great introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thanks for everyone for joining. So my name is Dan Jast. I work for the Poughkeepsie Client Experience Center as a Z Technical Specialist, and what we kind of do is we do hostings, POCs, POTs for IBM clients, showing off some of our new technologies and allowing them to get hands-on experience with those technologies to decide if that's something that they would want to add to. So I've been focusing on a lot of the cool new technologies, hence why I'm here today presenting on Zowe. Other ones I focus on are ZOS Connect, ZOSMF, and that's kind of where I've been sitting. I've been at IBM now for about 2 years, and before that I graduated from Marist College. So today we're going to be going over basically the Zowe project in full. We're going to start pretty much at the beginning here. And give an introduction, some quick facts about Zowe, kind of why we're even talking about this thing, Zowe, and why we're working on this project, giving the goals for Zowe, what we're really trying to achieve with this project, and then what is it, right? So there's all these pieces that make up this Zowe platform. I'm going to go into pieces shortly there. Then like to do with these sessions is I really like to demo. I know people like seeing the technology and seeing what it can do. I'm going to do a nice lengthy demo showing all the different aspects of what Zowe is and what it can do, and then give you information on how you can get started with Zowe and start interacting with the community. If there's any questions, as we kind of discussed earlier, we can handle those at the end. So first, so what is Zowe? What are we talking about today? So Zowe is actually the first open source project that is based on the ZOS operating system. Because we've already had, Anaconda and Spark, Python on the ZOS platform for some time now. But now this is the first open source project on ZOS that is focused on the operating system ZOS itself. So this is a full open source project licensed under the Open Mainframe project, which is an extension of the Linux Foundation. And really what we're trying to do with Zowe is we're trying to make the mainframe more easily adaptable for people to come onto the platform, start working with the mainframe, start interacting with ZOS, and not having to go through a year or two of training to start being able to interact with something like ISPF or TSO, or any other type of interaction you have on a green screen with ZOS. We're really trying to make these commonly used interfaces into ZOS, like GUIs and command line interfaces that more easily provide functions to work with ZOS. So really quickly, just some really basic information here about Zowe and where we've come along the way. So Zowe, the beta was actually launched at Share St. Louis in 2018, and then we announced the full GA of Zowe at Think in San Francisco. And that was Zowe 1.0.0. We are now running Zowe version 1.3, but we have Zowe version 1.4 targeted for release for tomorrow. So hopefully we'll be seeing that drop tomorrow. As you can see here, there's some metrics on the screen. Had a lot of engagement with Zowe already. Even before the official GA version, we saw 950 downloads of the beta before the GA version was released, which is really exciting. We've already had a lot of teams working on extending Zowe, which we'll get to later on, which is a huge aspect of the Zowe project, is the extension and the plugin aspect to this. We have a huge Slack community where we're constantly talking about configuration issues, helping out clients if they're having those type of issues, as well as kind of discussing the direction which we're going to take the Zowe project. And then on the bottom left there, you can see that we have a website that hosts a lot of information and documentation for the Zowe project. And there's links to a lot of these resources at the end of these slides. So why are we talking about Zowe? So kind of as I just said, and I'm going to go through this a couple times here, is that for a new hire or for a new professional coming onto a mainframe team or into a mainframe role, there is a big learning curve, and it's going to take that person time to be able to start adding value to their team and being able to really start contributing back to their team. So what can we do to make that learning gap shorter, really bridge that learning gap for new hires to start being able to utilize those skills that they're learning off platform, maybe on x86 or in Linux or something, and start being able to apply those skills to ZOS and start working with the mainframe that way. And that's kind of what Zowe's doing, is we're getting this coexistence of cloud models going here by providing GUIs and command line interfaces into ZOS, as well as working with APIs. We don't want to change what you're currently working with, so that's why we have the ability to add plugins and extensions to Zowe. So if you have an application running, you can run that either on the Zowe Desktop or in the Zowe CLI and keep utilizing that infrastructure you already have. Also, this is all simple, familiar, and you'll see that some of the languages that this is written in and some of the languages you can write with, exploiting some of this Zowe technology, is going to be simple and familiar to those new hires either coming out of college or coming off from a different platform. So that kind of brings us into this Zowe vision statement, which kind of pulls together everything I just said, right? We're going to attract new people to the platform by providing, new and ways to interact with ZOS, and we're really simplifying the whole process and learning ZOS and learning mainframe by providing these common interfaces to allow people to start interacting with ZOS almost immediately once they start their new role. So this is how things are being done currently today, right? So we have all these different things running on ZOS. We have ZOS MF, TSO, ISPF. We have some languages that we're working with. We're working in Unix system services, and you have someone specific on your team that has skills in a certain area or multiple of these areas, and they're starting to work with the mainframe. So, it requires very specific skill sets. I don't think I know one college who's teaching JCL programming in college right now. I don't know of many people doing that. Rex I hadn't heard of until I got to IBM. And just some of these other areas you're not really going to have experience with coming off of a different platform or coming out of college. So you need a specific skill set to be able to really make an impact here. And how long is it going to take that person to really develop that skill set? That's really what we're trying to really drill down upon and try and that piece there. So this is how people are doing things nowadays. This is kind of the model that we're trying to change. We don't want skill set and have to go through training or with a mentor that has been at the company for 30 years on a very specific piece just to learn how to do a basic task like copying a data set. So what we're trying to move towards is something more like this, where we have all of this stuff that we've been working with for years, like TSO, ISPF, Rex, and JCL, and then we provide new, more modern interfaces to work with these type of things. So first, you'll see right here in the middle, there's a big section on APIs, and that's really what drives Zowe home from the base. Zowe SMF is the core prereq for Zowe at the time, and that's because of all the APIs that Zowe SMF enables. Zowe SMF enables dataset APIs to edit, to work datasets, edit datasets, create datasets, a lot of different work with datasets, and I'll show some of that functionality in a bit here. And what Zowe does with those datasets, or with those APIs, is it pulls all those APIs together into something we call the API Mediation Layer, which then hosts the API catalog, which lets you then host all of your APIs that are available to you on your system from a single interface and really start benefiting from some other benefits that run within the API Mediation Layer, like a discovery service for those APIs, so it can automatically discover APIs that are available on your system, as well as single sign-on capabilities and high availability capabilities, such like that. And I have two other ways that come out of the box, and most of the stuff that I'm showing here out of the box functionalities that come with Zowe. These are not extension capabilities, but then you have two ways of interacting with Zowe. You have the web UI, which has a lot of different applications and looks almost like your normal Windows desktop type application that runs in a web browser, and I'll demoing that in a bit here, as well as the CLI, which is a Node.js based CLI, which actually comes from Broadcom. That is, so I actually forgot to mention this. Zowe is a joint project between three big organizations in its current state. IBM, who provided Zowe SMF and the APIs in the background. Broadcom, who provided the CLI and some of that framework there, and then Rocket, who provided the API work, as well as some of the work that goes on in the desktop there. So this is a joint project. Everything's open source. Nothing is owned by any of us at this point when it comes to the Zowe pieces. So this is kind of what we're working with here at the Zowe ecosystem, you could say, at a glance. And as I kind of have mentioned, this is really built to be extended upon. So the desktop, the command line interface, the API mediation layer, that's all meant to be extended upon. And what I mean by that is, first, at the API mediation layer, it comes with all the APIs that are enabled from Zowe SMF to mess with datasets, to mess with jobs and workflows. But maybe wanting to work with the ZOS Connect Administration APIs, or some DB2 or Kix APIs that you have available to yourself on your system. And you can add those APIs to the API mediation layer to start taking advantage of some of the benefits that come with having your APIs hosted there. You can also do the same type of thing on the web desktop, which I'll be demoing in a bit, where if you have an application, let's say you're working with Spark and you want to be working with Jupyter Notebooks to be running SQL queries against your data. You could be having, so very simply, you can have applications to the Zowe desktop to have something like a Jupyter Notebook or some type of iframe application or React running straight on your Zowe desktop. Very simple and very easy to do. Another way of creating a plugin for Zowe is via the command line, which basically allows you to issue commands and access ZOS resources right there locally from your laptop in your terminal, just like you would if you were pulling up your terminal on a Mac. Very similar experience, and you'll be seeing that here shortly. So these here on the left and right are some of the plugins that have already been developed and are public and available for use for Zowe users. And there's more being developed every single day. So this is an ongoing piece here, this whole ecosystem and extension piece. And the more extensions and plugins that we have developed for Zowe allows really for this overall vision of where Zowe, between the command line, the desktop, the API mediation layer, along with some other tools that come with these pieces, can really be your one-stop shop for your ZOS employees. And you'll be seeing kind of why I say that in a second here. So we're just going to go quickly into all of these pieces really quick, just to kind of show what they are before I demo, just so you have a little bit of an understanding where I'm coming from here. So first, we're starting with the REST services and APIs. And right here at the bottom on the right here, you can see Zowe SMF, REST APIs, and that's the core, right? That's where you're getting these dataset JES, USS, and system APIs to allow you to start getting some of that out-of-the-box functionality to start working with Zowe. But where the real functionality comes from, and what we're really trying to sell, not sell, but promote here, is bringing your own APIs and plugging those into the API mediation layer, and bringing in your own APIs and start taking advantage of the benefits of having your APIs hosted here. So that's what all these APIs here are trying to suggest is that not all the APIs come out of the box. We want to see some of those other APIs be pulled into the API mediation layer from our clients to see what else we could take advantage of there. So once we have those APIs, we load them into the API catalog, and then we have a couple different instances here. And the API mediation layer is actually based off of some Netflix technology that really high availability and discoverability across APIs across your environment. So having these a bunch of APIs plugged into the API mediation layer here and having them running here brings you a couple of benefits. One, there's something called the API catalog, which lets you know the status of your APIs that are running. So it's constantly doing almost like a heartbeat check type thing in the background that's checking against those APIs, making sure they're up and running and available to the user. There's also a gateway, which kind of is what you're seeing here, this catalog. And that provides that single interface into your APIs within Zowe. It makes those APIs highly available, and if they're not available, it'll let you know in that dashboard there by saying all services are not running. And you'll see when I show the API catalog where these things are shown. And then the discovery service, it's checking out against the APIs you've enabled for the API mediation layer and bringing those into the API catalog, and basically provides you this catalog or repository of APIs you have on your system. So this is a small little topology here. I'm not really going to go into this too much. Kind of the example of how these APIs are interacting with Zowe SMF and with Zowe and with the API mediation layer here. If you want to go more into this, I've sent Len the slides, and I'd be more than happy to share the slides with anyone at the end of this presentation. We have the APIs all enabled. Let's bring it all together and show how we're going to be working with these APIs. That's where the web desktop really comes into play. And you get a lot of out-of-the-box functionality with the web desktop. The three applications you're going to see on the web desktop here in a little are the Explorer applications, your Jest, your MVS, and your USX Explorers. And that is really your modern interface into ISPF to work with datasets, to work with Jest, or to work with USS. And this is really cool. There's a lot of cool functionality built into these applications. There's also 3 sample applications on the desktop to allow you to get a sample for how you would plug in either your React, your iframe, or your Angular application to the Zowe desktop, and it's a very simple process and well documented on the Zowe website in how you can do that with your own application. This is really a very common interface. There's a TN3270 emulator on the desktop. There's a SSH terminal on the desktop, and there's a lot more applications being written for this weekly that we're looking to promote with each new release of Zowe moving forward. Then there's the Zowe CLI, and the Zowe CLI is really cool in itself that it has all these commands that you can work with ZOS and interact with ZOS with. But the real power and where you will see a lot of the functionality of the CLI being used is the ability to script these commands. And I have a couple sample scripts that I'll be showing off here during my demo. But this is where kind of that learning bridge gap comes into play. And if you have a new hire coming onto a ZOS team, and let's say they're coming out of college and they know Python and Bash and JavaScript, and they've scripted with those languages and they're comfortable with those languages, they can then take those skills and start applying them to ZOS and start scripting ZOS functions in common languages that they're comfortable with. They don't need to learn Rex. They don't need to learn JCL to do this. This is, their current skill set, and having some understanding of what the task they're trying to complete with the script is on the ZOS side, but then being able to write that language that they're comfortable with. There's also plugins for this. So example, I'll show off a Kix plugin and a ZOS Connect plugin for the CLI, but there's many more out there. I know there's an MQ one being dropped in an next release shortly. So at this point, I'm going to switch over to the demo. So 1 second. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this this desktop here that I'm looking at right now, and I'm actually going to switch over to API mediation layer to start so we can look at some of these APIs first. So here we are. We're at the API mediation layer. Right here, we can kind of see that there's 2 things running. So we have the discovery service running, which is going out there looking for the APIs I've pointed the API mediation layer at and discovering them. And then we have the API catalog, which is then pulling all those APIs together and providing us an interface to view and work with those APIs. So every time you see me log into anything here, I am actually logging in with my TSO credentials that I am accessing my ZOS LPAR running ZOS 2.3 with a pretty full middleware stack. So just logging in, and here we are. We're in the API catalog now. So you can see there's a bunch of different APIs running, and we can see at the bottom here it says services are running. If I had more plugged into the API catalog or the API mediation layer, you would just see an additional box here that would say ZOS Connect EE APIs or Kix APIs, and then hopefully a button at the bottom saying that all services are running. But to get a little bit deeper into this, we'll kind of show here that you can drill down into these. You could learn about what the endpoints are for these APIs if you want to call them directly, Unix files or datasets APIs. But really what this hosts also is the Swagger documentation for those APIs. If you have Swagger documentation already defined for the APIs that you're trying to add to the API mediation layer, it makes it so easy to basically just provide a pointer to the Swagger doc, and then you could start working with these APIs right there, right out of the API mediation layer catalog. So this is kind of how I test the functionality of my APIs before I even start really working with them. So here, an example that I like to show, this API does get a list of members for our partition data set. So if I list out JCL library on the system, I should get back, oh, it's going to ask me to authenticate really quick. And here we see that I'm back. This is actually the members in my danjast.jcl PS. These are actually the dataset members that I'm getting back. And this is kind of that background functionality that then the CLI and the desktop is really utilizing in its front ends to display some of this. So that's just, how the APIs work. You can go through these and test out other APIs if you'd like. But we really like to show how these APIs are being exploited. So that brings us over to the Zowe Desktop. And here on the Zowe Desktop, I'm just going to refresh really quick to make sure everything is live. And it automatically logged me in because I was logged in already. So I would have logged in with the same credentials that I'm added to a ZOSMF group. That just allows me to be a user of ZOSMF, which allows me to exploit the APIs. So you can see I'm logged in as Dan Jast. I'm currently running back one version of Zowe. I'm running 1.2. A nice little time and date thing at the bottom. It gives you almost a normal desktop feel and look. So at the bottom here, they mount some applications by default just to give you some default applications. So right here is, your normal TN3270 application. So not everything you're going to be able to do normally on a green screen you can do right now on the Zowe Desktop. If you needed to jump into a TN3270 screen, you can do so on here and do everything pretty much normally as you would on a normal green screen. Same type of thing with this. I mean, if you want to SSH into a system, you can do that there. And then these are the Angular, the React, and the iframe samples if you wanted to provide your own application to plug into the desktop. But as I kind of said, the real functionality and the real highlight as out-of-the-box functionality are these Explorer applications. And the first one I pulled up here is the MBS Explorer. And this is basically your file explorer in ISPF. So right here, this is almost your ISPF 3.4 line where you would put in your high-level qualifier or any other information you would need to point to your datasets. So right here, I have my high-level qualifier in here. If I wanted to back this out and go to sys1, I can do that and list that out. It might take a little bit longer because sys1's pretty big, but there's the full sys1 high-level qualifier on the system. So this is really your file explorer into ZOS. But what I'm going to kind of show off is some of the extra functionality that comes with this. And, I'm going to drill down into my JCL library here and go to a job. So here, we're looking at a JCL, at a job here that I've written that basically allocates a flat file data set under my high-level qualifier here with just a little line of line written in there. It says it's data set's been created on a certain date and time by me. Some things to highlight here is that JCL highlighting is automatically enabled for different data sets that are recognized as JCL. And something cool about the JCL highlighting here is it actually lets you know about what some of these parameters mean. highlight over them. You can get information on what some of this stuff means. And that's just kind of cool for someone like me who was new to ZOS when I started working here, and I've kind of learned what some of these JCL parameters are trying to achieve in the process here by just scrolling over some of these and reading this. But so I've edited my job now. Let's say I'm ready to submit it to Jez. So all I need to do here within the MBS Explorer, once I've edited this and saved this, is right-click, hit submit. So it's going to ask me to authenticate again. And right there at the bottom, it's going to say demo job has been submitted successfully, and it gives me a job ID. So something that my mentor always tells me is you always want to check your job code, your return codes to make sure it got a return code 0. So right here, it already automatically makes me the owner of the jobs that are being sorted out here. And you can see that demo job has returned a return code 0 because it automatically maps that to the front. So we can kind of scroll through here and see everything that we would normally see with DSF here. It's very, very similar to, jumping through your SDSF panels and looking through your job status. It's very, very similar to that. But, all I did to submit this job was I right-clicked demo job, I hit submit, and then I jumped over here to the Jez application, and now it's right here in the front since my ID submitted it. And that's kind of showing off some of this extra functionality that we're talking about with bridging this learning gap, is that it doesn't take much extra knowledge to learn how to right-click and hit submit his job, and then go over to SDSF, or go over to the Jez Explorer back to see how the job status was. Also, if I wanted a job now, all I have to do is right-click and hit purge, and then it says purge request succeeded. Once I refresh this, that job is no longer there. So this is some of that. It doesn't take a lot of prior knowledge and a lot of prior training to teach a new hire how to then go into ISPF, find the data set you want to submit it, and look at the output. This provides a new, more modern interface into doing something like that. Also, Unix System Services Explorer, which really does the same thing here as the MBS Explorer, which you drill down into your Unix directories and look at your data sets that way. But as I kind of said, some of the real power here is the plugin ability and the extension ability to Zowe. So I actually have Spark running on this same ZOS LPAR that you're seeing today, that Zowe's running on. And I have a Jupyter notebook for exploding Spark running there within this same LPAR. So now through iframe, because this is just a web application, I could just plug this iframe application into my Zowe desktop and now have it running here on the Zowe desktop. So now I could have my ZOS system programmers, my ZOS operations guys, and my ZOS analytics guys all working from a single interface here on the Zowe desktop, because all the tools that they need to do so are all here in one place. And as I said, this isn't fully built out yet. All the apps and all the functionality that we want to have that is on ZOS now is not built into this desktop. But as time goes on, and as we get beyond the first year of this product being GA'd, we will start seeing some more and more functionality being added over. That's basically the Zowe desktop. There's some other applications I didn't show off. So if you want to work with ZOSMF workflows, you can do so via the desktop as well. If you want to work with just editing code or whatever the case may be, they provide a nice code editor in here with plenty of different languages you can work with. So there's a lot of different other cool little out-of-the-box applications that come with this as well as an API catalog application that basically shows off what you're looking at here. Okay, so then moving on from the Zowe desktop, we're now going to move into the Zowe CLI. So in working with the Zowe CLI, so I'm going to pull this screen up. Let's just minimize this really quick. Okay, so in working with the Zowe CLI, at any point I could type the word Zowe into the command line, and this will provide me basically the help for the Zowe CLI command syntax. So here's all the options I have for myself with issuing Zowe CLI commands. I could do ZOS console commands, work with files or datasets or jobs, issue TSO commands, or work with USS. There's a lot of different work I can do. And then you can see some of these plugins that I have enabled here. So I have Kix as a plugin enabled, DB2 as a plugin, ZOS Connect as a plugin. These are not out-of-the-box functionalities that come with the Zowe CLI. These are things that I've added that are available for the Zowe ecosystem for users to use. And I use those because this is middleware that I have running on my system that I work with, and I want to be able to script use cases against, or being able to start automating tasks against some of these pieces. So some simple commands that we could start off by showing out here is a Zowe ZOSMF check status. And this will show us the status of all the different ZOSMF plugins that we have enabled in our ZOSMF environment. And this is a fully configured ZOSMF, so this is going to have everything enabled. Quickly. So, a common command, if you want to see what's running on your ZOS system, you could run a DAL in SCSF, right? So here's a console command for a DAL. These are all the different things I have running on ZOS, and this is right here in my local Mac terminal. I'm not running anything, on the ZOS right now. This is connecting back to the ZOS via APIs and via some profiles that I have set up for my local Zowe CLI instance to connect back to ZOS instances. So then, starting to work with some of these plugins. Here's a Kix example for if I have a resource loaded into Kix. Here's how I can get details on that resource. So this is IST Poma is actually an application running, a COBOL application running in Kix that I can now get the details on, or refresh, or load a new application into Kix via the Zowe CLI command syntax for the Kix pieces, as well as ZOS Connect. Here are all the APIs that I have enabled on my ZOS Connect server running on this same ZOS instance. So really, there's a lot you can do with this Zowe CLI. I'm just trying to show off some examples of these commands that you can issue. But kind of what I'm trying to get at here, and what I mentioned earlier, is the ability to script these commands. And that's going to bring me into these scripts. And let me just open one up. I meant to have one open. Perfect. So right here. So now we have one of these scripts actually open and enabled here. And what we're going to see here is that now I am scripting some of these commands. And what this first Zowe script is doing is it's going to ask me what's a data set that I want to submit, and what do I want to do, basically. So I'm going to submit it as a job. It's going to check that it got a return code 0, and then let me download the output of the job if I wanted. Wondering, and I didn't mention this, what is this interface that I'm working with here, and why does it say Zowe? So something that has been developed for the Zowe platform is actually this Visual Code Studio plugin for Zowe. And this provides basically direct connections from your Visual Code Studio application running on your desktop back through your Zowe CLI profiles and Zowe CLI APIs that are enabled to your ZOS. Up here on the top left, you can see these are the datasets section for the Zowe CLI plugin, and this is in real time the datasets that are enabled on for my high-level qualifier on this LPAR. So right here, this is the job I submitted earlier to allocate this dataset. I can, delete datasets and submit datasets as jobs straight from here, same as I was on the MBS Explorer application. You can see that dataset just went away. Same thing here for Unix system services, and same thing here for jobs. I can see all this output right here from a single interface. In a common application that people coming out of college or people with skills in the distributed world, they will have skills in an IDE common to Visual Code Studio, and will be able to start impacting more quickly that way. But let's just start playing around with some of these scripts here. So let me navigate to the right directory. And so let's start playing around with some of these scripts. So first we're going to kick off test 1. So what data set do I want to submit as a job? So we're just going to kind of submit that same job again, demo job, and we're going to hit enter. So it says it's submitting demo job as a, to Jest. The return code we got is 0, and what it's really doing there is it's running a Zowe command to get the job ID, and then it's doing another command to get the status via the job ID. I'm loading that into a variable and then checking against that variable for what the value was. So then it says, would you like to download your job output? I'm going to say yes. And what's happening now is it's running another API in the background to go and download that job output. And now I can look at that job output locally. If anything went wrong with that job or anything, I can now get that information here. So that's that's a very, very simple use case for one of these APIs. There's a lot more complex ones that I have available here. So let's start showing off a little bit more complexity for what we can do here. So this is a job that basically allocates a JCL library for a user. It has some sample members that it's going to pull into a JCL library for that user. So I'm just going to basically kick this one off, and you'll see this this run here in a second. So it says, what's the high-level qualifier I want to put the JCL library under? So I'm just going to specify mine. And it's going to allocate a JCL2 since I already have .jl1. I have it set to do so. As it's been allocated, so if I refresh this now, I'll see that there's a JCL2 now, but and that's because I haven't let the job actually, or the script actually finish yet, because it's asking me now, would I like to put some members in that PDS? So I'm going to say yes, and what it's doing now is it's actually going to run this JCL that I have in the script to basically copy the members I have specified from a data set to the target set. And now when I refresh this, that JCL2 has 12 members that it's been populated with. So it's a little bit more complex. Now we're starting to add some JCL to our scripts and starting to do some of these ZOS functions. And if you're a new hire coming onto the platform, a lot of this JCL is already written for you, and you're just kind of learning how to exploit it. So being able to pull this JCL into the script, being able to start exploiting it that way, provides you a cool interface into automating some tasks in ZOS. So then kind of where this is all getting at here is really bringing this to a base script that I've written recently. And if you do follow the Open Mainframe project and some of the Zowe promotion places, you might have seen that there was a big script that was promoted recently, add user IDs to a ZOS system. And this is actually a script that I have fully functioning for my environment. Add a user ID across 9 different LPARs depending on which LPAR I specify, and it will do all the work from adding the user ID's high-level qualifier all the way down to giving it a home directory in Unix system services and mounting a ZFS for it. So a lot of extra functionality built in here. I'm not actually going to show this one off today, but just as an example of kind of what you can get at with some of these basic scripts and learning some of the scripting capability with the Zowe commands is you can get to something like this, which is doing some real tasks that would take someone like me as a new hire probably a good amount of time to complete adding a user ID to a system, where now I could have a script that can do it across 9 different LPARs. So that's pretty powerful. So really where you see a lot of popularity and use with Zowe right now is here in this Zowe plugin for Visual Code Studio. Visual Code Studio is getting a lot of attention so far with the Zowe product coming out with this plugin, because you can, if you're a developer on the platform, or if you're just working with datasets from time to time, you don't need to log into ZOS anymore or go on to your PCOM or host on demand session. You just need your Visual Code Studio plugin set up, connecting back to your ZOS, and you're good to go here for most users' standpoint. If you're doing some heavy hardware work, some DFSMS work or something like that, obviously, yeah, you're still going to need to go into the green screen and start working with some of those pieces. But over time, we're hoping some of that functionality gets ported into a web UI application or a Zowe CLI plugin, and then we could start scripting those capabilities or working with those functions as well a different way. That basically ends the demo piece to this presentation, and I see what time we're at, so I'm going to try to wrap up here within the next 10 minutes so we can time for questions. So jumping back to the presentation. So there's kind of this feel of Zowe core applications or Zowe core plugins versus Zowe exploiters, or things that aren't out of the box functionality And that's really where we're focused here with the Zowe project. Have all this out of the box functionality, which is great, like the Explorer servers and the command line interface that comes with all those different commands. But what we really want is we want our clients and our ISVs to start writing their own plugins for their own software or for their own applications. Whether they sell that to clients or whatever, we want them to start plugging that in and start enabling those applications or that code for Zowe. Another that we're looking at here is we're looking at making Zowe a prereq for some applications for software for ISVs. You can make Zowe a prereq for that if organization chose to do so, and Zowe can be kind of that underlying platform that you would then need to set up before you run and install some other type of application or software in your environment. So Zowe can come packaged with some products as well. So here's kind of just this high-level architecture of what we're looking at here and everything I just showed off. You have your web UI, your CLI, all your REST APIs, and that via code extension and this is all running locally on my system. The only thing not running on my system is that application framework for the Zowe Desktop. That's running back on the ZOS with a Tomcat web server. But you can kind of see how some of these interactions are going on and where users would be interacting with these pieces. So as I've mentioned a lot of this already, so I'm kind of going to be jumping through some of these slides pretty quickly. So where is Zowe extensible? As I said, we can already extend the desktop. We provide 3 samples to let users more easily see how to do this with fully documented instructions on how you can then use these samples to bring your own applications onto the desktop. So that Jupyter notebook I showed off running on the Zowe desktop was an example of this. Also, you can add your own APIs to the API catalog and add your own Swagger documentation to start taking advantage of having all these APIs hosted in a single place and having the discoverability and high availability benefits of having your APIs hosted in the API Mediation Layer. You also have your CLI and you have those plugins. So I showed off the Kicks and the ZOS Connect plugins for the Zowe CLI. As I said, MQ has been developed and they're working on publishing that within the next couple releases. And there's some other applications that I know they're working on plugins for as well in the near future. So some announcements about what's going on in the Zowe community and how you can get involved and forward and towards the end of this presentation. So at the last Share conference, Broadcom actually announced that they were going to provide support for the Zowe product. So if you are working with Zowe and you want support for the product, if you're having issues or you want assistance in plugging in your application, have ideas for the direction of the platform, Broadcom is providing the support, and you can contact the names below to get that support. Into the future, we're definitely trying to change Zowe and develop it and listening to what our customers and our clients say about Zowe and what we can be doing in the future to make this better. So right now, Zowe is installed via PAX format. You would just download it from the website, install it. There's no maintenance type thing. There's no SMPE going on there. So what we are trying to move towards is an SMPE installable version of Zowe, which then would allow you to automatically provide maintenance or updates to the Zowe packages without having to. Basically, what you currently do is uninstall and reinstall to bring it up to the newest version. So we're working on really remodeling this whole process here for the installation for Zowe to really modernize this, bring it to a ZOS type installation, and then to be able to take advantage of some of these SMPE benefits that you get there. There's also ways now that just dropped with the newer versions of Zowe that you can actually install Zowe on your platform, but not configure it to make sure that everything has installed correctly and datasets are in the right conversion type or anything like that before you actually run the configurations against it to start enabling it to work. So there's a lot of different work going on here around the installation. If you want to be more involved or want to know more about this, there's that GitHub link right there, but there's also a blog at the end of the slides here that talks about our direction that we're taking this into a little deeper than this slide does. So as I kind of said, we want our ISVs and our clients to kind of start building their commercial offerings with Zowe. So this is a conformance criteria that the Zowe team is currently working on to basically provide those ISVs to say, hey, we need your code to live up to these certain standards if we want this to be a product that's a commercial offering packaging with Zowe or anything like that. So there is a conformance program that we're working on providing to ISVs and to clients around this work here. We want things to, when they are promoted and provided to the Zowe community, want to make sure that they're ready to go and that they perform the way that we would expect them to perform. Another area that we're looking at and that we're really excited about is this Zowe market concept. And this is really kind of like an app store that would run on the Zowe desktop and basically provide you with some pre-configured framework applications basically to allow you to add Jupyter notebooks or add, HMCs or something like that into a Zowe desktop application for use, and then you can connect that back to your local environments and configure them to connect to your local servers or whatever the case may be. This is some area that I'm personally very excited about because I don't really program too much, and having the ability to add some of these applications I use currently, Zowe Desktop would be very beneficial to me. So if you want to get more involved with Zowe, we have an open committee. Everything's open source. Even our schedules and our meetings are all promoted in the open, so anyone can join any of the meetings that we have. I'm actually a member of the Zowe onboarding squad here, and we focus on having people added to the Zowe community and bringing people onto the platform, helping with installation problems and stuff like that. So you might find me in that Slack channel over there. But all these squads are open and looking for new members. And we hope that people get involved once they see the value of this platform and some of the work we're doing here. So here's just some links to get involved. If you do plan on installing Zowe in the near future, I really suggest joining the Zowe Slack channel in the Open Mainframe project. That is where you will find the developers. That's where you'll find me. That's where you'll find all the Zowe users who are constantly helping each other out with installation or configuration, anything. And there's a lot of really great conversation going on there about the action of the project too. There's a couple other ways to get involved. As I said, all these meetings are in the open and are recorded, so you can go back and see these if you want. You can join these meetings. They're all out in the open. Here's some more ways to get involved. If you want to, on your own time, go through some demos and look at some videos. You can do that via these two links here. There's also Zowe is now on Z Trials for IBM, so you could also go consume Zowe that way. But these are cool, just two cool videos that you can show off some of the functionality I showed today if you want to show that off to anyone. And that's pretty much it. So that's basically where the presentation and the lunch and learn from my end will end, but I'll be happy to take any questions for the remaining 12 minutes here.
Dan, thank you very, very much. Excellent job. I learned something from you all the time.
Thank you very much.
One of the things I'd like to just add is that pretty much everybody has my contact information already, but again, and if any of you would like to further discuss Zowe, talk about a POC or POT or any kind of implementations and so on, we would be glad to help you in any way we can. So please don't hesitate to reach out or discuss one-on-one. This session has been recorded, so it'll be available for replay. I'll send out the replay link once it's established. And I guess what we can do, Dan, are you ready for a little Q&A for a while here, if anybody has any questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me unmute everybody. Now, if you're not talking and you have a lot of background noise when I unmute you, please mute yourself back. And in the meantime, I'll unmute everybody, so anybody who wants to ask a question, please do so right now. Everybody's unmuted. Anybody have any questions? Questions, anybody?
Done a good job if there's no questions.
Yeah, I think you really did a great job, so you covered everything pretty much.
Thanks.
If anybody thinks of questions later on, please don't hesitate to send me an email or reach out by phone, whatever is easiest for you.
Yeah, you could feel
And
free
we'd
to
be
reach out
glad
to me too.
follow up with you, get back on the phone with Dan or myself or whatever we need to do.
Awesome.
Dan, any other closing remarks before we end the call?
Just once again, thank you for having me. Thank you to everyone who joined. There's a lot of really exciting work going on here with Zowe, and if you're going to Share Conference the next week, please introduce yourself to us. Please get involved. We have a Zowe meetup going on where we're going to be introducing all the main developers and all the main people around the project, kind of talking about the direction we're taking. So we hope to see you there.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dan. Bye, everybody. And until the next session, have a good month. And we'll be in touch with our next time. Bye-bye
Awesome.
now.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, Dan. Thank you.